Happy Saturday morning. It is 49ers alarm update time. A lot to talk about, including the allocation of the 49ers draft capital and how it's changed. Take a look at this. 2017 to 2020, D-line heavy. 2021 to 2024, a lot less D-line heavy. You see the D-line allocation percentage-wise from 40% of draft pick value in those early years down to just 7% over the course of the past few seasons. I think that's going to change, and I think that needs to change during this 2025 NFL draft. We are less than a month away. We're only a couple days away from the NFL owners meetings. In fact, tomorrow I fly to West Palm Beach. It's going to be a fun couple days down in South Florida, talking to Jed York, Kyle Shanahan, and John Lynch. It should be the perfect table setter for the NFL draft. But first, I want to talk about the 49ers' second scheduled 30 visit. Jalin Conyers is the player's name. This is a tight end, played for 3 colleges, Oklahoma, then Arizona State, where he had the Herm Edwards connection. Remember, Herm Edwards, John Lynch go back because Herm was John Lynch's position coach back in Tampa Bay, the DB coach for the Buccaneers. Herm Edwards was the coach at Arizona State. 49ers seem to like those players with ASU connections. And then after ASU, we saw Jalin Conyers finish up his college career at Texas Tech. Now, athletically speaking, this is a very, very potent player. 9.24 relative athletic score is solid. Take a look at the measurables. He's not your tallest tight end. He's only 6'3", so you got a lower center of gravity, but you've got big-time weight. There seems to have been a point where he was closer to 270 as well. 260, the official combine weight for Jalin Conyers. 35.5-inch vertical, 10-foot broad jump. Those are both great. That's obviously color-coded here in green in the relative athletic score with solid speed. It's not world-breaking speed, but 4.7 at 260 is nothing to scoff at. Meanwhile, the really good agility, or I would say even great agility, is what pushes Jalin Conyers to that nice relative athletic score. A 3-cone time under 7 seconds, always 2 thumbs up, especially for somebody of his size, and a good short shuttle time as well for Jalin Conyers. 4.27 in the short shuttle. Those of us who follow the offensive linemen in the short shuttle, and we say, you just got to get under, what is it? I think under 4.8 or 4.9. Well, this guy's at 4.27, obviously lighter at 260. Anyway, Jalin Conyers, really, really versatile. And the title, I say, a hybrid between Kyle Juszczyk, George Kittle, and maybe even a little Deebo Samuel. I mean, he was heavily used in the pass game, Jalin Conyers was, and I think that it's safe to say on the surface the 49ers are interested in adding another receiving tight end. But it is not just any receiving tight end. George Kittle is a 6'4", 6'5" weapon, somebody I think who's built prototypically like a receiving tight end. Somebody like Jalin Conyers is only 6'3". That isn't a prodigious amount of height. And you could see here on the relative athletic score, there's only one cell that is in red, and that is the height score. Also, he's heavier than your typical receiving tight end at 260. And if he's been above that weight, and he can be above that weight, well, then all of a sudden you're definitely not dealing with your conventional body type for the position that the 49ers are presumably looking for. Kyle Juszczyk is what, 6'2", a little bit shorter. I've talked about the difference between Juszczyk and the standard tight end as far as height and leverage goes in blocking. Juszczyk can execute blocks that a taller tight end can't because of the lower center of gravity. 49ers, I think, really like that as part of their offense. And the first thing that I notice about Jalin Conyers, although I don't think he's the best blocker, but potentially the 49ers think they can develop him in that way. He's been more of a weapon with the ball in his hands over the course of his college career. But I see the 6'3" height, and I say, okay, maybe this is a long-term H-back / tight end / receiver. You know how versatile Kyle Juszczyk is. Maybe this is a longer-term solution for the 49ers at a position like that. And then you look at Deebo Samuel, who obviously left to Washington, and he lined up in the backfield. He lined up out wide. He lined up in the slot. He was all over the place. Well, Jalin Conyers lined up all over the place to the point where he actually threw 7 passes in his college career, had a college quarterback rating of over 180. There's no limit in college. He had 2 starts technically at quarterback because he lined up in the Wildcat. But the point is that Jalin Conyers was operating out of the backfield a significant amount of the time during his college career. And he was also catching passes downfield, working out of the slot, working from a tight end position, doing this at 260 to 270. And so I see some physical characteristics here of a Kyle Juszczyk. I see some physical characteristics of and usage characteristics of a Deebo Samuel. I see some characteristics in terms of usage and, also physically, athletically, when you see the great relative athletic score with the explosion and the agility, I see some stuff that's reminiscent of George Kittle. So I say a hybrid of all three in a way. The 49ers have a strategy that they're following in terms of stockpiling offensive weapons, even if there's not technically a roster slot or a depth chart slot open for a specific guy right now. We already saw this last year. They pick Ricky Pearsall, and then everybody said, oh, they're going to get rid of Brandon Ayuk, or they're going to get rid of Deebo Samuel. Obviously, eventually, they did get rid of Deebo Samuel, but for the 2024 season, they kept all those guys because they're just trying to layer this team with adaptable weapons. And I think that the further along this goes, they're trying to layer the team with adaptable weapons who best fit Brock Purdy's skill set. So somebody like Jalin Conyers, who's got the excellent short shuttle time, the excellent 3-cone time, I think they see somebody who might be able to separate at a level that they need, coming now from 12 personnel packages. Or, if he can line up in the backfield, then you could do even crazier stuff. But Brock Purdy dealt with 2 tight ends a lot at Iowa State. And I think that the constant goal is to arm him with the type of weapon that can create some space on the field, separation-wise, because of the timing that Purdy throws with. That's obviously so important. The lack of it last year was very damaging to the 49ers, but arm him with the type of weapon who could do that, moving out of the formations that Brock Purdy is most comfortable with, and also moving out of the formations that Kyle Shanahan likes most when it comes to setting up the run game. So you can add a player like this, and you could still have Kyle Juszczyk, who's going to be with this team in all likelihood for 2 more years. You could still have George Kittle, who's going to be with this team for at least a couple more seasons. We're going to see with the contract extension for Kittle this offseason. But this works even with Luke Farrell added to the team, who is reprising the blocking tight end, the Charlie Werner role. This looks like a 6th or 7th round projection, by the way, for Jalin Conyers. And he's the second 30 visit that we have reported so far. When we talked about Harold Fannin Jr., the 49ers' first reported 30 visit the other day, we were hitting on a lot of the same themes, right? Although this guy was an absolute record smasher at Bowling Green. We're talking 50% of their offensive output. We're talking FBS record in terms of receptions for a tight end, 117 last season, 1,555 yards. That was also an FBS record. But the theme was 49ers want a receiving tight end who can pair with George Kittle for both the short term and then in the long term, potentially even replace George Kittle. But for now, somebody who can pair with George Kittle to give the 49ers a more adaptable threat offensively, because that is something they've been missing and something that even with Luke Farrell, they won't necessarily have. This is a guy that's only caught a handful of passes over the course of his NFL career. So they're looking at Harold Fannin Jr., and they're looking at Jalin Conyers, who's shorter than Harold Fannin Jr., but I think cut from the same cloth, and that is versatile offensive weapon who could do a number of different things for the 49ers. And they're trying to stockpile these offensive weapons because you could never have too many. If you're looking at it in the long term, yes, you get who might not be with the team for the next 3, 4, 5 years. And you could say, okay, these draft picks can grab the torch and carry it forward from there. But if you're looking at it in the short term, you see how many players the 49ers lost last season. And you say, wow, this offense, there was a total wrench thrown into things. And you saw it in the separation numbers. You saw it in the poor run offense numbers. Brock Purdy fought through it as well as he possibly could. But there was a game, I still remember, the Chiefs game in week 7. 49ers really wish they had even more offensive weapons in the reserve to overcome so many of the injuries and the illness that they saw with Deebo Samuel. So there's nothing wrong with continuing to stockpile here, especially if you can get this guy at the price of a 6th or 7th round pick. I mean, that you have 11 draft picks if you're the 49ers. You may have more. And I'm reading about Bill Walsh in the 1986 draft. The amount of trading that Bill Walsh did, I think it was like something like 6 trades before that legendary 1986 draft. And a lot of the philosophy that year was really resemblant of what we're hearing this year. Really deep draft, maybe not as top heavy. Bill Walsh just wanted more picks. He wanted more darts to throw up against the wall. And this was a revolutionary strategy at the time. So he started executing all of these trades. And the trades ultimately netted the 49ers more picks. And the class was an absolute haul. Coming off the 2025 class where they picked Jerry Rice. 2025, sorry. The 1985 class where they picked Jerry Rice. That'd be funny if the 49ers picked Jerry Rice again in 2025. But in 85, they picked Rice. In 86, they landed the big-time trade expansion draft with all the trades down and all the maneuvers. They were able to build the third wave of that 49ers dynasty team of the 80s. That one even lasted through the 90s. Charles Haley came aboard as part of the 1986 draft. Well, if you want a video about the 86 draft, and I'm sure I'm going to write an article and do a video about it, but a thumbs up in the comment section would expedite that process. I think that it's going to be a great comparison right now. Anyway, SF Data Niners did such a good job with these graphics right here. We can go back to them. I think it's just fascinating to look at the 49ers capital spending over the years. When they needed to build up this roster at the very start, I mean, it was D-line after D-line pick, right? It turned into a running joke how much the 49ers loved drafting defensive linemen. And we're talking about rush over coverage back in those days. Look how small the piece of the pie for the defensive backfield was. Obviously, things changed in 2021. That's why all of a sudden there's a much higher share for the QB position because of the Trey Lance trade up. But the most notable to me is how much smaller the defensive line market share has gotten. I mean, the last time they used a top 100 pick on a defensive lineman was for Drake Jackson in 2022. And this is going to have to, you've seen it now, right? It's going to have to increase. You've seen the downstream effect of this. The defensive line has progressively gotten weaker all the way to the point of the number 29 run defense for the 49ers. Not all the D-line's fault last year, but now we see the roster holes and we see where the 49ers are going to have to make that investment. And I think they can rein back on the DB draft capital spending this offseason because they addressed that, I thought, very efficiently during free agency with some of the signings that they have made. So draft capital spending, fascinating stuff. This right here is tight end performance. 49ers trying to find some help for George Kittle. We've got targets per route run on the x-axis, and then I don't talk much fantasy, but expected fantasy points per route run, a good measure of productivity for a tight end. So you want to be further to the right and further up. George Kittle is obviously in the upper right corner. You look at other metrics, and George Kittle is a complete outlier up in that corner. Here, he's there along with Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid, Jonnu Smith, Brock Bowers, Travis Kelce, David Njoku as some of the most productive tight ends in the game. Just imagine if the 49ers are able to add somebody to pair with George Kittle in that regard. How about our Brock Purdy highlight of the day? This from Johnny Dell's Football Academy. Awesome stuff against the Detroit Lions. Working up in the pocket, and then look who he finds. Isaac Guerendo, versatile offensive weapon. So I'm going to rewind this right now so we could see where Guerendo starts. He is in the backfield. Now, I'm going to pause it because we're going to see this is a 4-man rush, and the 49ers offensive line, just backed into Brock Purdy. McKibbett's not a great rep. Aaron Banks at left guard. Well, that's Nick Zakel, actually. So Aaron Banks was out at this point. Nick Zakel, also not a great rep. Purdy, but it's mainly the tackle's fault here. Brendel actually has a good rep. 64 is doing his job up front. But Purdy, because both tackles effectively lose, has to step up in the pocket. And it's almost like he's throwing out of a bunker. It's a grenade out of a bunker. Finds Isaac Guerrero, who ran the wheel route out of the backfield. Perfectly delivered. Well caught by Guerrero. And yes, this is why the Jordan Mason's no longer on the team. You didn't see this with Jordan Mason. Guerrero, the speed just to burn. The speed to burn past the defender, and then the receiving skills to flip his head around and make that catch. Purdy put the ball to where he caught it in stride. That's big time. And that's why Isaac Guerrero is going to see the field this year in relief of Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy highlight of the day seems fun, doesn't it? I mean, that's a hell of a throw under duress for Brock Purdy. Other news right now for our 49ers alarm update. We got brutal general Brandon Ayuk timeline yesterday. I think the assumption had been that he was going to miss the start of the season. We're talking probably first 4 games was the assumption before we had heard more. John Lynch spoke at the NFL Combine, which is over a month ago at this point, or about exactly a month ago. Yeah, up in Indianapolis. It's March 29th. John Lynch said, he's going to go back in with Dr. Neil Elatrosh in LA, who performed the checkup procedure, or who's going to perform the checkup procedure. He performed the actual ACL and the MCL surgery, and he's going to give us a marker update. And the thought was that the marker update would, ascertain the timeline for Brandon Ayuk. And I think there had been an assumption that it was going to be the first 4 weeks of the season that he missed, maybe the first quarter, because that's the PUP length, right? If you're put on the physically unable to perform list for the start of the year, the regular season, you're going to miss at least those 4 games. Adam Schefter came out yesterday and said that it's more like a mid-season timeline. Now, he wasn't specific. It was more of a general discussion from Adam Schefter, but gee, mid-season? No wonder nobody wants to trade for Brandon Ayuk. If this could be half the season, then there's no guarantee that he's going to be at 100%. In fact, it's likely that he won't be at 100% coming off of the injury. Well, at a contract that is carrying $50 million of guaranteed money over the next 2 seasons, I think we really understand why things are the way they are. Best 49ers path forward is probably just writing this out with Brandon Ayuk, hoping that there's a reapproachment, hoping that stuff is smoothed out, hoping that he returns to health and can become a productive weapon for San Francisco. April 1st, trigger date for many of the 49ers contracts. A lot of guaranteed money, a lot of different stuff happening on that April 1st date. That's coming up. Obviously this week. And we're going to be at the owners' meetings when that does happen. I'll go through some of the triggers, maybe all of them for you, just to give you a nice summary on a video that is coming up soon. All right, there's your 49ers alarm update. New prospect, Jalin Conyers, 230 visits accounted for now. Fannin and Conyers, 28 more to be accounted for. Those are our best hint regarding the 49ers strategy in the upcoming NFL draft.